Margaret Thatcher 1979-1990. Margaret Thatcher, commonly known as the Iron Lady, was a trailblazing political figure who served as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 1979 to 1990. Born on October 13, 1925, in Grantham, Lincolnshire, she entered politics after studying chemistry at Somerville College, Oxford. Thatcher's early political career was marked by her rapid ascent within the Conservative Party. She was elected as the Member of Parliament for Finchley in 1959, a position she held until her resignation in 1992. Known for her unwavering convictions, Thatcher became the leader of the Conservative Party in 1975, at a time when Britain was grappling with economic challenges, rising unemployment, and a sense of decline on the international stage. Her leadership style, often characterized as assertive and authoritative, set the stage for a transformative era in British politics. When Margaret Thatcher assumed office as Prime Minister in 1979, Britain was facing a series of complex socio-economic challenges. The country was mired in a deep economic recession, marked by high inflation, rising unemployment, and sluggish growth. The prevailing economic consensus, which leaned towards Keynesian principles and state intervention, seemed ineffective in addressing these issues. The winter of discontent in 1978-1979 had witnessed widespread strikes, creating an atmosphere of social unrest. The situation demanded a decisive leader who could navigate the turbulent waters of economic reform and societal change. In this context, Thatcher's arrival as the head of the government heralded a departure from the post-war consensus and a shift towards a more market-oriented, conservative approach. Thatcher's political agenda was shaped by her belief in free market principles, limited government intervention, and a commitment to individual responsibility. Her economic policies, often referred to as Thatcherism, aimed to revitalize the British economy through privatization, deregulation, and a strict focus on reducing the power of labor unions. Margaret Hilda Roberts, later known as Margaret Thatcher, was born into a modest family on October 13, 1925, in Grantham, Lincolnshire. Her father, Alfred Roberts, was a grocer and a local politician, while her mother, Beatrice Roberts, operated the family store. Growing up in a small market town, Thatcher's early life was shaped by the values of hard work, thrift, and self-reliance instilled by her parents. Margaret Thatcher showed early academic promise and a keen interest in politics. Her academic prowess led her to study chemistry at Somerville College, Oxford, where she developed critical thinking skills that would later define her political career. Her upbringing in a family with conservative values, coupled with exposure to her father's involvement in local politics, set the foundation for her own political aspirations. Thatcher's entry into formal politics began when she was selected as the Conservative candidate for the safe Labour seat of Dartford in the 1950 and 1951 general elections. Although unsuccessful in both attempts, this experience served as a valuable introduction to the world of electoral politics. Thatcher's tenacity and commitment to her political ideals became evident when she won the seat for Finchley in 1959, marking the beginning of her parliamentary career. In the subsequent years, she held various positions within the Conservative Party, steadily building a reputation for her strong conservative principles and determination. As she rose through the party ranks, Thatcher became the Secretary of State for Education and Science in Edward Heath's government from 1970 to 1974. This position allowed her to implement policies that reflected her commitment to educational reform and marked her as a rising star within the Conservative Party. Margaret Thatcher's political journey reached its zenith when she became the leader of the Conservative Party in 1975, a position that made her the first woman to lead a major political party in the United Kingdom. This leadership role paved the way for her historic election as Britain's first female Prime Minister on May 4, 1979. Margaret Thatcher's economic ideology was rooted in classical liberal and conservative principles. Often referred to as Thatcherism, her approach emphasized free market policies, limited government intervention, and individual entrepreneurship. Rejecting the Keynesian consensus that had dominated post-war British politics, Thatcher believed in reducing the role of the state in the economy and promoting competition and market forces. Thatcher's conservative economic philosophy aimed to unleash the potential of the private sector, enhance efficiency, and stimulate economic growth. She argued that reducing the burden of government regulation and freeing markets from constraints would lead to increased innovation, productivity, and ultimately benefit the entire society. Central to Thatcher's economic strategy was the adoption of monetarist policies. Embracing the ideas of economists such as Milton Friedman, she believed in controlling inflation through strict control over the money supply. The monetarist approach involved setting targets for the growth of the money supply, with the belief that stable prices would create a conducive environment for economic growth. Thatcher's government implemented tight monetary policies, which included controlling interest rates and reducing public spending. The goal was to curb inflation, which had been a persistent problem in the British economy during the 1970s. The monetarist experiment was not without challenges, leading to periods of economic instability and high interest rates. However, Thatcher remained steadfast in her commitment to these policies as a means of achieving long-term economic stability. One of the most distinctive features of Thatcher's economic agenda was the extensive privatization of state-owned industries. She believed that privatizing these enterprises would introduce competition, increase efficiency, and reduce the burden on the public finances. Beginning in the early 1980s, Thatcher's government initiated a wave of privatizations, targeting industries such as telecommunications, steel, energy, and transportation. Notable examples include the privatization of British Telecom in 1984, British Gas in 1986, and British Airways in 1987. The sale of state-owned assets to private investors not only transformed these industries but also encouraged a culture of shareholder capitalism, giving individuals a stake in the success of these enterprises. Thatcher's economic reforms had a profound impact on the British economy, but they were not without controversy. The emphasis on market-driven policies and the restructuring of industries led to a period of economic upheaval, resulting in increased unemployment, particularly in traditional manufacturing sectors. While supporters argue that these reforms eventually led to increased efficiency, competitiveness, and economic growth, critics contend that the social cost, particularly in terms of unemployment and income inequality, was substantial. Unemployment peaked in the early 1980s, reaching levels not seen since the Great Depression. The restructuring of industries and the closure of unprofitable state-owned enterprises contributed to this economic dislocation. Margaret Thatcher's social policies were characterized by a conservative philosophy that sought to reduce the role of the state in individual lives and encourage self-reliance. In line with this approach, Thatcher pursued significant reforms to the welfare state, aiming to curb public spending and foster individual responsibility. One of the key aspects of Thatcher's welfare state reforms was the restructuring of social benefits and entitlements. The government introduced measures to limit the growth of welfare spending, emphasizing the need for recipients to actively seek employment and reduce dependency on state support. This approach was rooted in the belief that a more targeted and efficient welfare system would incentivize work and discourage long-term reliance on government assistance. Thatcher's policies also targeted housing benefits and council housing. The Right to Buy scheme, introduced in 1980, allowed tenants in council housing to purchase their homes at a discounted rate. While this initiative aimed to promote homeownership and individual asset accumulation, critics argued that it contributed to a reduction in the availability of affordable housing for those in need. Thatcher's approach to education and healthcare reflected her commitment to market principles and individual choice. In the education sector, the Conservative government introduced a series of reforms, including the introduction of standardized testing and the national curriculum to raise academic standards. Additionally, Thatcher advocated for parental choice in education, leading to the expansion of grant-maintained schools, which had more autonomy in managing their finances and curriculum. In healthcare, Thatcher's government implemented reforms aimed at introducing market forces and competition. The introduction of the internal market in the National Health Service, NHS, in 1990 allowed hospitals to compete for patients, with the goal of improving efficiency and service quality. Critics argued that this approach undermined the egalitarian principles of the NHS, while proponents contended that it introduced accountability and choice. One of the defining moments of Margaret Thatcher's foreign policy tenure was the Falklands War in 1982. The conflict arose over the disputed sovereignty of the Falkland Islands, a British overseas territory in the South Atlantic, which was invaded by Argentine forces on April 2, 1982. Thatcher's response to the invasion was swift and resolute, as she mobilized British military forces to retake the islands. The war lasted for 74 days and resulted in a British victory, with the Argentine forces surrendering on June 14, 1982. The Falklands War not only bolstered Thatcher's domestic popularity but also solidified her reputation as a strong and decisive leader on the international stage. The conflict had lasting implications for British foreign policy, reaffirming the UK's commitment to defending its overseas territories and projecting military force when necessary. Margaret Thatcher's relationship with the United States, particularly with President Ronald Reagan, was a cornerstone of her foreign policy. The two leaders shared conservative ideologies and formed a close personal and political alliance. This transatlantic partnership, often referred to as the special relationship, was characterized by mutual support, shared values, and collaboration on various global issues. Thatcher and Reagan worked together closely on matters such as the Cold War, where they supported the NATO alliance and opposed the expansion of Soviet influence. The deployment of American cruise missiles in the UK as a response to the Soviet Union's missile buildup became a significant point of collaboration between the two leaders. Their united front in confronting the Soviet threat contributed to the eventual end of the Cold War. The economic policies of both leaders, emphasizing free market principles and deregulation, further strengthened their alliance. Thatcher's visits to the United States and Reagan's visits to the United Kingdom symbolized the warmth and strength of the Anglo-American partnership during the 1980s. Thatcher's stance on European integration was marked by a mixture of pragmatism and skepticism. While she initially supported the idea of a common market, her views shifted over time, particularly as the European Community, EC, evolved into a more politically integrated entity. Thatcher was wary of what she perceived as an erosion of national sovereignty and an increase in bureaucratic control from Brussels. One of the most notable episodes in Thatcher's relationship with the European Community was her famous Bruges speech in 1988, where she outlined her vision for a decentralized and economically liberal Europe. She expressed concerns about the centralization of power and the potential threat to individual freedoms within the evolving European structure. Thatcher's skepticism towards further European integration manifested in her resistance to the idea of a single European currency, which she famously opposed by declaring, "No, no, no," during a speech in the House of Commons in 1990. Her reluctance to fully embrace European integration led to tensions within her own party and contributed to her eventual downfall as Prime Minister. The miners' strike of 1984-1985 was a pivotal moment in Margaret Thatcher's premiership, representing a significant confrontation between the government and the National Union of Mine Workers, NUM. The roots of the strike can be traced back to the early 1980s when the National Coal Board, NCB, proposed a plan to close unprofitable coal mines as part of a broader effort to modernize the industry. The coal industry, a traditional stronghold of trade unions, faced declining demand and economic challenges. The proposed closures, however, were met with strong opposition from the NUM, led by its charismatic and influential leader, Arthur Scargill. The dispute escalated into a full-scale strike in March 1984 when the NCB announced the closure of Cortonwood Colliery in South Yorkshire. Margaret Thatcher's response to the miners' strike was characterized by a determined stance to break the power of the unions and implement economic reforms. The government, under Thatcher's leadership, viewed the strike as an opportunity to confront what they perceived as outdated union practices and to assert the authority of the state. Thatcher adopted a multifaceted approach to confront the strike, which included leveraging the police force to maintain order, using legal measures to limit picketing, and implementing policies to weaken the economic viability of the strike. The government also stockpiled coal in preparation for a prolonged strike, reducing the immediate impact of the miners' action. The confrontations between striking miners and the police, particularly the infamous clashes at Orgreave in June 1984, became emblematic of the intense and often violent nature of the strike. Thatcher's unwavering commitment to breaking the strike drew both support and criticism, with some praising her resolve in the face of union power, while others decried what they saw as the government's heavy-handed tactics. In March 1985, after almost a year on strike, the NUM conceded defeat, and the miners returned to work without achieving their objectives. The strike had severe consequences for the mining communities, leading to mine closures, job losses, and a lasting sense of resentment within these communities. Margaret Thatcher's resignation as Prime Minister in 1990 marked the end of an era and was influenced by a combination of internal and external factors. One of the key catalysts was growing discontent within the Conservative Party, particularly among moderate, wet, conservatives who were critical of Thatcher's leadership style and some of her policies. The introduction of the community charge, or poll tax, sparked widespread public protests and contributed to a decline in Thatcher's popularity. Internal dissent within the party escalated, with several prominent ministers resigning in protest against her leadership. Notably, Geoffrey Howe's resignation as Deputy Prime Minister and his subsequent scathing critique of Thatcher's European policy in his resignation speech in November 1990 further undermined her position. The Conservative Party faced declining opinion poll ratings, and there were concerns about the party's electoral prospects in the upcoming general election. Recognizing the internal divisions and sensing a potential challenge to her leadership, Thatcher decided to resign to avoid a damaging leadership contest within the party. In November 1990, Thatcher announced her resignation, stating, "I will be resigning as the leader of the Conservative Party as soon as a successor can be elected." John Major, her Chancellor of the Exchequer, succeeded her as both the leader of the party and the Prime Minister. In conclusion, Margaret Thatcher's leadership legacy is one of a transformative period in British politics. While her achievements in economic reform and foreign policy are acknowledged, the controversies surrounding social dislocation and the divisive nature of her leadership style continue to shape perceptions of her impact on the UK. The enduring legacy of Thatcherism remains a subject of ongoing analysis and debate in the realm of British political history. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it informative, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this in the future.